Oh shit, is that you, Zammy? Oh, well, I haven't seen you in a while. What you playing there?
FEH.
Really? Are you still making videos on that game? Oh, cool. Well, see you later then.
Well, this is something I didn't think they'd be coming back to. Fire Emblem Heroes, a game that I have played for a few months straight on this channel until I took a bit of a hiatus of sorts to sort some things out inside of my life. Despite me not making content consistently, I still played this for a long while until I ultimately got bored with everything over a year later, and it has turned from a game that I initially thought was alright into one that has not only disappointed me with every update coming out one after the other, but eventually into what it is today, and that is unfortunately another cash grab mobile game that started out with tons of potential, but ultimately, when stripped bare of its music and graphics, is rotted to the core with pay-to-win mechanics, poor game design, and an overall mediocre or bad product. I didn't want to make this video as soon as 3.0 was first out, even though I initially was hopeful for what the update would bring. It's been several months since the update, along with several months since the last time I ever made a video on this game in particular. Well, in general, really, but you get the picture. There have been many issues that I have desperately been hoping would be fixed. I've sent feedback and other reports to the team working on the game several times through the in-game system, but unfortunately, as the game closes on its second year, it's safe to say that the game isn't going to improve in the way that I would have hoped. I have been playing this game since 2017 when the game was first released back inside of March, after I heard initial reviews and from my personal first impressions that both rate the game rather highly. Many changes have happened over time that are ultimately for the better, such as an increase to your stamina meter, decrease of stamina cost, free summonings on the first pull, and many others. Unfortunately, most of the issues I've had since launch haven't truly been fixed, and have only been exacerbated with changes to the current systems or completely floundered modes of play that didn't need the additions that were given. I can easily say that this game is overall worse now than it has been for over a year, and the increasingly predatory nature of intelligent systems and Nintendo have forced me away from truly playing this game beyond doing daily quests and keeping up with the story. To not waste any more time, let's get started with my first major gripe: gameplay. Also, I should note this is called an analysis for a reason. I'm going to explain mechanics and systems in place that are fundamentals to the progression, story, and gameplay. There's a good chance that you, the person watching this, already understand what I'm talking about, and it will seem redundant, but these explanations are in place to make sure that I'm not confusing everyone with every topic only half presented as if it was common knowledge. I think understanding how something works is more productive overall to discussion. Also, I should note that I recorded a lot of the earlier lines whenever I was really sick, so I probably sound half dead whenever I'm delivering them. Sorry about that. You only have a few actions when it comes to what you can do with your characters: attacking an enemy, moving your units, waiting, and using your assist skill on your allies. There are no items, no hit rates, and no critical rates, and most randomness can be completely omitted. Unfortunately, it's never quite that simple. In what used to be a patience game where you could instantly tell all the effects of combats before it ever occurred, is now filled to the brim with effects that only trigger during combat, and abilities that get so out of hand that you get nearly a paragraph or more of text for newer weapons and skills. While a traditional Fire Emblem experience is much more difficult to explain and understand, this is one instance where a simplification is greatly appreciated, both because it saves me a lot of time and also because on-the-fly math is much easier to perform with little complications. You only have 5 stats: attack, HP, defense, speed, and resistance. Attack is how much damage you do on top of the power of your weapon. Speed is mainly used to determine whether or not another character will hit you twice. Specifically, if you or your opponent has 5 more speed during combat, a follow-up attack will occur to whoever has the advantage. Defense is a subtractive reduction if the enemy's attack is physical, and resistance is the same, only magical. HP is pretty obvious, make sure this number doesn't reach 0, or you're dead. Besides just raw stats, you also have the weapon triangle, and to keep it simple, let's just say that red has advantage over green, green has advantage over blue, and blue has advantage over red. Each weapon fits into one of these 3 categories, with the exception of bows, daggers, staves, and transformations, all of which have no color at all or are another part of the weapon triangle. A color that wields any specific weapon cannot switch out, so you can't give your swordsman an axe or your archer a magical kidney stone. Finally, for combat, the last notable thing to talk about is specials. Every attack that you do or take takes down the number that is next to your HP. Specials either trigger during, before, or after combat. Specials that trigger before tend to deal flat damage outside of the weapon triangle, but require you to get into combat first in order to charge them outside of unique setups. Specials that trigger during combat either activate whenever you receive damage, reducing it, or allow you to deal more damage, or heal yourself whenever you attack the enemy. Or both. Only one special triggers after combat, and it allows you to take an extra turn if it's fully charged whenever combat has ended. And to end off my explanation is skills. They're split into A, B, and C. A directly affects how your character performs during combat or gives stat changes, which can be conditional or flat. B skills are pretty much completely random, from changing attack priority to allowing for more follow-up attacks, to healing you every other turn to making it impossible for enemies to charge specials when fighting you. This really is where it tends to be pretty much a grab bag. C skills, however, are almost always supportive, either to yourself or to your allies. They range from giving your allies more stats during or before combat, to debuffing the enemy when certain conditions are met. Now that I've explained everything, allow me to complain incessantly. One of my biggest problems with FEH is that the further the game gets along, the harder it is to keep track of every aspect of the game's combat going on, and it only got worse since the advent of beast units. I think the best way to illustrate this is using a newly released unit from 2017 versus 2019. Try to keep track of both of the units as I explain them. Reinhardt is a blue mage cavalry unit who has 4 skills: Blazing Thunder, Dire Thunder, Vantage, and Go Cavalry. Dire Thunder is Reinhardt's weapon. It has 9 might and reduced speed by 5. If Reinhardt attacks first, he will hit twice. Blazing Thunder is his special skill. When fully charged, it deals his current attack power times 1.5 minus the enemy's resistance. It is effectively another hit before combat. Vantage allows him to attack first if his health is below 3/4 of his total. Go Cavalry will give a bonus of 4 attack and speed to other cavalry units around him. Next, let's look at Selkie, who, by the way, I had to record in multiple parts because her description is way too big. Selkie is a physical blue cavalry unit, which you wouldn't realize if you just looked at her sprite, since other characters that are also beasts don't have the extra movement despite being similar physically. She comes with 5 skills: Attack Speed Bond, Sabotage Attack, Even Res Wave, Iceberg, and Fox Kit Fang. First, let's talk about Sabotage Attack. It will reduce your enemy's attack if they are next to another enemy, and as long as they also have 3 less resistance than her. Attack Speed Bond will grant Selkie +5 to attacking speed during combat if she is next to her ally. Even Res Wave will grant her +6 during even number turns to herself and allies next to her as a flat bonus until the next round of combat. Iceberg will add 50% of her total resistance to her attack whenever activated. Finally, we have Fox Kit Fang. This is her weapon and it gives her 3 resistance. If her resistance is higher than the enemy's resistance, and they use a weapon in close quarters combat, which includes swords, axes, lances, dragonstones, beast stones, and other stuff I guess, she will receive a bonus to all of her stats during combat equal to 50% of a difference between the 2 stats, but cannot exceed a value of 8. If her turn starts next to no other allies or only other beast units or dragon allies, she will transform into her beast form. Whenever transformed, she will receive +2 attack, and if she attacks first, the enemy receives -4 to their attack and defense, and they cannot hit back more than once. Alright, sounds simple, right? Now tell me, could you remember every single thing I just told you about Selkie's weapon and what it does on the first go, or do you remember that the man with very tiny hands attacks twice if he goes first? Do you want to know the real kicker on this? Selkie herself isn't even that good as far as units go. Despite all the in-combat buffs and other absurdities, if you manage to hit her on the head with either arrows, daggers, or an axe, she goes down pathetically easily. With Reinhardt, sure, he also gets defeated easily if the enemy gets in range, but he also takes out most of the cats with relative ease simply due to the ability of him being able to hit twice before the enemy gets to hit him back. But you see, it would be poor to explain that the gameplay was bad because of long, drawn-out, and very complex paragraphs that would put Yu-Gi-Oh! To shame. You can have gameplay that is very complex but also very satisfying whenever you manage to calculate and plan everything inside of advance. What is frustrating, however, is how horrifically unbalanced the game is and continues to get worse and worse the further into the game that you get. You know how I described Reinhardt earlier? For a very long time, he was considered the most broken unit in the game due to the fact that he could attack twice, and that his cavalry status means that he can move farther than your other units. People used to petition that this unit should be banned from PvP game modes specifically because he was very, very difficult to deal with. Then we get units like Surtur. Just by standing inside of his attacking range of 2 spaces, you will always receive 20 damage before you even fight him. He will always debuff your stats by 4 and buffs his stats by 4 before combat. This is paired by the absolutely ridiculous amount of attack and defense he gets, where making him attack you directly is an absolute death sentence. Okay, so just attack him first, right? Except his skills make doing that next to impossible. Wary Fighter prevents either unit from attacking more than once. Steady Stance not only grants +8 defense but also reduces your special charge by 1, meaning you're not going to proc your specials on him unless they happen to already be charged. He also comes with Bonfire, which turns his high defense into a weapon, and only takes about 3 hits total for it to activate. So hope you're able to either outrun him or attack him with magic so strong that it just kills him in 1 hit. What a broken character. How could they release something like this in the game? He's so strong that nobody can realistically fight him unless they were specifically built to do so, by bringing weapons that are effective against his class, armored units, and also carrying Icebreaker, which ensures that you will be able to kill him by hitting him enough times, or Triangle Abdets, which will reduce your damage enough to maybe be able to take a hit from him and survive long enough to make a dent inside of his armor. It is a very bad design to put out a character that has the ability to basically kill everything in sight and doesn't have any real counters besides building and using units specifically designed to defeat them. But that's the extent, right? They didn't release a unit more broken than him, right? Well, allow me to bring up Legendary Azura. Azura has a whole bunch of skills just like everything else released today, but let me start with her most absurd ability first, Grey Waves. Whenever she dances a unit, if that unit is either infantry or flying, they gain an extra space of movement. That means that all those characters who were stronger than Reinhardt but were limited by their movement are now just as dangerous, if not more so. This, combined with her skills, makes it so that anything she dances is now going to absurdly fuck you up unless you somehow manage to determine exactly how she's going to act in combat, which relies on manipulating the AI instead of planning how your units are preparing to defend. Something that is next to impossible to predict, the way dancers will act out of the player's hands, and in game modes where as much as 1 death means several wasted minutes, I don't think I need to explain this any further. Simply put, the combat overall is a mess, and the further and further into the game that we get, the harder it is to properly fight on all fronts, and the strategic value of this strategy RPG series is heavily devalued because of that. This isn't even accounting for the fact that there aren't any real game modes that resemble the original series in the slightest, be they a campaign with a long battle chapters, or planning of what your units are going to wield in combat unless they happen to inherit as many weapons and skills as they can prior. There is no trading or items after all, so you don't get any of that. There is somewhat of a silver lining to this. Building units is still fun. For the most part, if you happen to pull a unit that you like, you can still build them with much more freedom than what you could do in either Fates or Awakening by a large margin. It is somewhat satisfying to watch a character once regarded as absolute garbage be a complete powerhouse after full investment. You can make most units as strong or as weak as you want, and there is a lot of fun to be had with just how customizable the units are. However, I'll say that most of the simplified gameplay hasn't changed enough in a way that truly deepens the experience any more than it has since launch. This gameplay is, at best, Fire Emblem Light, and it hasn't had enough significant changes to warrant a gameplay scoring beyond decent. No matter what game mode gets added, they're not willing to expand beyond what has already been established, or at least not in a way that would actually have meaningful impact. But hey, clearly that traditional stuff isn't important, and you can instead spend those resources on the oh-so-important tap battle and plaza modes, and sexy bunny costumes that make everyone in public think I'm one of those individuals. Unfortunately, investing into units that you enjoy using isn't necessarily the best idea if you want to maximize the amount of rewards possible, especially with how the game handles the various modes that have been inside of the game since launch and further, like Arena, or they happen to be mostly useless because they simply aren't specialized enough. And speaking of which, let's go ahead and segue into game modes.
This is really the second part of me explaining gameplay, but it's a lot more general this time.
There are tons of different modes in FEH, but the amount of modes that actually change up the gameplay beyond what you already have can be counted on one hand, so instead, I'm going to divide them into categories of Basic, Brigades, Raiding, and Miscellaneous. Basic is what I described earlier. You have 2 to 4 units to use of any variety, or possibly the same, and you take on various challenges while trying to avoid your units being killed. This is used during story mode, hero battles, training tower, arena, tempest trials, voting gauntlet, forging bonds, allegiance battles, chain challenges, heroic ideals, blessed guardians, grandmaster trials. So much of the game is the exact same in terms of gameplay that it hurts. The only meaningful difference between these comes from the chain challenges and tempest trials, where you don't heal between each map, and that's really it. And don't give me the pair-up argument, only one character currently can use it, and it's not going to be useful in any of the game modes where this type of action would actually be helpful. Even though the core gameplay isn't necessarily broken, there's a severe lack of variety. Besides specific story maps, you only have one objective: kill every enemy and avoid getting killed yourself. Most of the maps have randomly generated enemies as well. Sure, Birthright and Echoes also were primarily kill every enemy, avoid being killed, and also had randomly generated enemies on preset maps, but Birthright has tons of other things attached to that, and there's a few defend and boss killing maps as well. Echoes has dungeon crawling and one-range archers, I guess. I don't know. Regardless, these are both considered to have the absolute worst map design in the entire series by a wide margin, and unfortunately Heroes isn't much better. I'm still talking about the gameplay, what the hell is wrong with me? Let's just move on to Brigades. 3 game modes use this, one of which is retired. You have Rival Domains, Grand Conquests, and Relay Defense. In terms of gameplay differences, this one is more substantial but largely the same as before. Instead of just deploying 2 to 4 units, you deploy a whole 20 units. Only 8 are on the battlefield at a time, but as soon as one is defeated, more will spawn at your home base. Just so that you can't abuse them that much, you're also only allowed 1 dancer per map, so you can't just one turn clear it, at least not without a whole lot of preparation. These are closest to Siege maps, but what makes them unique is that you're destroying the throne rather than just sitting on it. The addition of this and many units on the field adds quite a lot to the variety of actions that you can perform, and at least to having more flexibility with what you can achieve. It's definitely one of my favorite additions to the game, and hey, if you don't want to use your units, you're able to pick the heroes from your friends list, or just go in with no heroes and use units that are completely random with how they're built. But unfortunately, it hasn't really been expanded upon since it was first released. It's real disappointing too, because there's a lot of interesting stuff that can be done here. Grand Conquest and Rival Domains are essentially just the same mode, just that one of them has you competing for territory and the other just has you versus a large group of enemies. You may have noticed that I didn't mention Relay Defense. Currently, this is the only game mode in FEH that has been retired, and for a very good reason. It is easily the worst game mode inside of this entire game, and I'm very glad it's gone. The objective is pretty simple: defend your bases and avoid getting your units killed. Store high enough to unlock the next difficulty. The problem comes inside of 2 major flaws. The first problem is that after 2 turns, your units automatically get switched out for the next 5 units needed to be used. This means that you need at least 4 separate teams builds before entering to effectively even fight against these guys, who by the way all have pivots, so that gets to your base very quickly. This issue is mitigated if you or your friends happen to build your teams way inside of advance, but it doesn't help with the second point. The second point? Look at these fucking stats! This is what abyssal enemies look like in terms of raw numbers, and every single character inside of Relay Defense is like this once you get past Infernal, which is the hardest difficulty in the game outside of this mode and Legendary Hero Battles. But this isn't a real challenge. This is the same as making everything have skills like Pavis, Luna, Vantage, trigger every single round of combat on top of enemies having stats that are much higher than the previous modes. Oh wait, that actually happened. The final real gameplay style to speak of is Raiding, the newest addition and the one that was easily ruined the fastest. To be fair, that goes more to the game mode it's associated with rather than the gameplay itself. At its core, it's remarkably solid inside of its foundation. You are given a preset map and are tasked with building a base that you can work for both defending your resource, the Ether Juice, while also killing off every enemy attacker. In order to build the resources required, you need Ether Stones, which are earned both as daily mission rewards and for raiding other bases. You also need to kill every enemy on the map within 7 turns or less, otherwise you go home with no resources and lost your Ether Juice. The maps designed by others can range from being a complete joke, team designed solely to go, Oh, that's cool. To a team that is equal to or higher than the bullshit that is Abyssal maps. I'll be honest, for a while this was my favorite mode to play, and kept me inside of the game for a good while prior to some updates to the system that ruined most of the fun to be had, and the lack of restrictions inside of the map also made it so that once people became aware of what worked and what didn't, it evolved to have its own metagame with units and characters that were once considered too niche or general to become absolute powerhouses inside of this new mode. It generally was a breath of fresh air, no pun intended, to the game since the last game mode added which sucked, i.e. relay defense, i.e. goddammit, Sonic has effectively 117 effective health. Why did they think it was a good idea to give an extra 15 health and 17 defense to a... oh my god! And to end that for now on a good note, let's talk about the other game modes not listed. There's only two to really talk about as of now, and that's Aether Resort and Tap Battle. Aether Resort is nothing special, it's just an area where you can send your mutants to rest around, wield weapons they shouldn't realistically have, sleep inside of broad daylight, and melt their skin off inside of a hot spring. It's just something to waste time in, and the only rewards you get are basically pennies of Aether Stones. So there's no real point to it unless you really want to maximize your rewards for raiding, but I don't use it. Tap Battle is even more pointless. It's literally just a rhythm minigame that is so poorly made that it makes Triangle Hero sound like a good idea. You can luckily disable your unit screaming at the top of their lungs random voice lines while most of the game mode is playing, but that doesn't change that the rhythm part of this rhythm minigame is awful. And you get at most around 6 songs for what is a total of 23 stages, all of which look the same. The final reward for all of that is your unit soaking inside of a bathtub. Yeah, this mode sucks. Let's just talk about the reward system. Let me add to the end here that other game modes added from when I initially made this section aren't going to be mentioned unless they fundamentally change the game enough to where I deem it necessary. So to everyone saying I forgot XYQ that was added last April, not quite. I just don't find enough differences to actually discuss it. Even after all that discussion whenever it comes to gameplay and game modes, there's only really a few modes that actually matter in terms of rewards. Beyond what you get for daily quests, there's no real reason to visit most of these modes. Most of them give small, menial shit that's going to pile up inside of your barracks for the longest time simply because other resources needed are much more scarce or valuable. Sometimes being given tons of one item is great, like stamina potions. I absolutely despise this system in most mobile games, and it's literally just there to make you stop playing because the company in charge said so. However, stamina potions are so plentiful that I can realistically grind as much as I want inside of either Training Tower or the special maps that give a ton of experience, and have enough left over to retry some maps if I happen to be struggling. However, most items are nowhere near as useful or plentiful. Crystals of a specific color can be used to level up your units, but once they reach level 40, they're completely worthless. You can also use smaller crystals for the first 20 levels, and then only larger crystals for the last 20. Despite this, I always end up with a surplus of these things. Why? Well, with the exception of dancers, healers, and units with exceptionally low attack, there's no real use for these things. Leveling up your units through training is not only incredibly easy, but also more practical as you gain more SP by fighting inside of combat, which allows you to unlock skills faster. So even if you want to skip the grind and just buy your levels, it's ultimately better long term as they'll be able to afford the skills faster than if you just feed them a whole bunch of experience. Now that's just crystals, right? Surely most of the currencies have some worth. Badges are used to promote your units and for forging sacred seals. Sounds useful, but you'll have so many badges just from doing Training Tower that it's a complete non-issue. Combined with the cost being incredibly low on both fronts. Arena medals are used to refine weapons, and nothing else. You get so many of these just from winning arena matches that they're also a non-issue. Light blessings allow you to revive units if you fail, but they're only useful inside of story mode and other modes where the difficulty isn't really that high. Dueling crysts are used to give you an extra matches inside of arena, but you only need a few matches per day anyways to get all the rewards. And Arena Assault doesn't even use these, so I don't really get why we get so many of these either. The amount of rewards that actually help you inside of any meaningful way can be counted on one's mutant extra thumbed hand. Orbs, feathers, refinement stones, sacred coins, dragon flowers, and heroic grails. We'll skip the first one because it's easily the largest subject and the one that has the most of this section filled up on. Feathers have really only one use, promoting your units up a star rank, with the max being 5 stars. To briefly touch, the higher the star rank, the higher your character stats are, and the more powerful their skills. That's all you really need to know about the star rankings, honestly. Virtually every single mode in the game gives you feathers, and you even get some by your units given you inside of bundles of 500 after using them for a long time. It's also a resource you're given plenty of from daily events, and you even get it from logging in every day. If feathers are such a plentiful resource, why is it that they can be classified as valuable? Well, that all goes back to cost. To upgrade a unit from 4 to 5 stars, you need 20,000 feathers each time, and the cost only goes down if you happen to merge 2 characters of equal star rank. It's not a large decrease, however, so you will still need tons of feathers regardless. When comparing what is most cost effective overall, it's better to keep both characters separated until they are merged at the highest star rank of 5, that way you don't have to summon more copies than needed later. Because of the high cost of unlocking potential and the pennies worth of feathers that you acquire daily, the overall value of feathers is the same as using Yugoslavic diners to purchase diamonds. Next up is refinement stones. These can be used to further increase the capabilities of weapons that are inheritable by most units of the same class. Most refinements are simple stat boosts to a unit with some specific to the weapon class, like armor effective weapons having a special refinement that ignores stat bonuses. That way an enemy can't just stack an ass load of defense and call it a day. It won't get around shield skills like Io's shield or Savalin's shield that disable effective damage, but they're still pretty good regardless. It takes 50 stones to refine a weapon's stats while you only need 20 to upgrade it to a higher version of itself. The only game mode that consistently gives refinement stones every single week is Arena Assault, and unless you're one of the top scoring individuals, refinement stones come anywhere from 20 per week to around 40, so a valuable resource that's actually rare and has tangible use, you know, and not just Venezuelan dollars. I'll briefly touch on this strange yellow liquid squeezed out of the refinement stones equal to the amount you spend when refining weapons. So, the goddess piss is used to refine weapons, but only weapons that are exclusive to individual characters unless 2 units happen to share the same weapon. Goddess Piss can be consistently earned by doing the infernal difficulty of rival domains inside of bundles of 10, supplemented by the refining method mentioned earlier. You need 200 to improve preferential weapons, while you only need 150 to make a brand new one. Given the sheer amount of weapons, both exclusive and inheritable, that can be refined, there is no way you're going to be able to refine everything, and it's also a resource you can't buy, so this is a grind to earn. Well, that was lengthy, but thankfully the next one is going to be much easier to explain. Sacred coins only have one use, improving sacred seals. The 4th skill slot isn't just for show, you can equip bonus skills onto it, and they vary from alright to incredibly powerful. To create the seals, you need anywhere from 10 to 50 sacred coins and a few badges, which you should have plenty of if you ever bother with Training Tower. It requires 50 to upgrade your seals once, while it requires 100 to upgrade them again after that. Sacred coins can be consistently earned via Arena and Arena Assaults, since voting gauntlets, grand conquests, and tempest trials only show up once every 1 to 2 months. Just like before, unless you happen to be getting the top ranks inside of every single season, you get anywhere from 20 to 40 weekly. By the sheer volume of seals available to upgrade and forge, this is also one that you're not going to be able to forge everything of. This is yet another resource you can't buy, so that's 2 valuable resources that are consistently earned by one game mode that also can't be purchased. Next up is Dragon Flowers. These are even simpler. Just feed an assload of these into your units and you're able to boost all their stats, even health, by +1 or +2 if they're infantry. They're color coordinated to match the specific class that unit gets. You only get these through Ether Raids, Allegiance Battles, and Heroic Ordeals. The average income varies weekly, but if you're playing efficiently inside of Ether Rage, you'll get anywhere from 40 or less Dragon Flowers of one color, while the other, depending on your rank, will give you 40 or less of another, with the color you're getting being almost completely random. Meanwhile, Heroic Ordeals let you fight inside a preset match with a specific hero to get at least 2 kills in order to get more flowers. These vary from the easiest maps giving you 2, while the hardest maps give you 40. And guess what? Once you finish the map, that's it. That's all the flowers you're going to get from them. I've saved Allegiance Battles explanation for later for the arena section, since I can discuss the game mode more there. You need around 600 just to upgrade a unit that matches out at +5, and for +10 instead you'll need around 860. Another resource that is valuable because of its scarcity, but hey, at least it's not only earned through one mode of play. Given the sheer amount of heroes across the entire game, it would be... Wait a minute, I'm starting to repeat myself, aren't I? And finally, our heroic rails. With 100 of these little things, you'll be able to summon from past events that previously gave out these units for free. A consistent way to build up units from the past, in a sense, since before they were stuck with only 1 or 2 merges if you weren't that lucky. Every time you summon a new hero to your cause, the price of a copy increases by 50 until it maxes out at 500 rails. You only get rails consistently from Ether Raids, of which you'll get 20 from completing the daily for at least 3 days in a row, 40 or less for the amount of lift that you have, and 40 or less for your rank. Unless the character in question already has a bunch of versions of them released earlier, you'll need... oh my god. You know what? Fuck it. I really shouldn't be boring everyone here with economics. I should really be talking about progression, because it's something I sort of skipped over earlier whenever I mentioned summoning and orbs, but now is the time I talk about the game's one and only premium currency. Yes, unlike many other gachas and mobile games, the only currency you can buy inside of this one is orbs. You earn orbs every week, doing various things like daily quests, long-term quests, the story mode, arena, events, legendary hero battles, and many, many more. Sounds like a lot, and indeed the amount of orbs that you got during special events and whenever the game first started were pretty ridiculous. However, between the middle of year 2 and the beginning of year 3, orbs have been massively cut back in terms of how much you receive, to even previous game modes not giving you anywhere near as much whenever they roll back around. But let me discuss that whenever I explain some other stuff. Now, what are the uses of this premium currency? While some of you will be saying, what aren't the uses, because of how mobile games usually handle this kind of stuff, in FEH, orbs can only be used as summoning other heroes into your barracks and expanding your barracks and castle. Sure, you can use them to restore stamina and arena marks and reviving your units inside of the story mode, but really, not only are the other resources for this very plentiful, but you're wasting what is otherwise the only means of getting better units and ultimately more materials for your units. Summoning is your only means of gameplay progression. Period. It is the end-all be-all of Fire Emblem Heroes and the only part of the game you're actually going to get anything worthwhile. Since I didn't talk about it earlier, inheritance is how steals are given to other units. The basic gist is that one hero is sacrificed from your barracks to become either a manual or a skill that other characters can use. You can only inherit 4 skills at a time, with lesser abilities leading up to it being counted. Want to inherit the Armor Slayer and Triangle Adept from Selena to counter that guy? Nope, you can only get the base weapon and the inferior version of TA because Armor Slayer counts as 2 different weapons. While somewhat arbitrary, it is very nice that most characters are not restricted whenever it comes to what they can pick from others. However, I need to have a brief caveat here that mentions that most characters don't have that many unique stats and abilities and are only set apart by what they come with by default. This leads to many characters being fitted into the bin of fodder, just sitting around inside of your barracks until you sacrifice them for skills that other units can and will use better. When summoning, you spend 5 ores to bring back a hero from a pool of 5 other ores where the colors and individuals of each summoning sphere is 100% random. You have a 36% chance of pulling a 3-star, a 58% chance of pulling a 4-star, and 5 stars are 6%, with 3 going into a banner focus and the other 3 going to an unspecified 5-star unit. If you spend for more summons inside of a specific pool, the orb value first decreases by 4 and then by 3 on the final pool, which amounts to 20 orbs for all 5 summons. Finally, if you summon 5 heroes, you get something known as a pity rate, where the 6% goes up to 6.5 and keeps building until you pull a 5-star hero or heroes. Summoning more heroes is the only way to not only get more skills, but also get more powerful heroes. Sure, the starting 3 heroes specific to this game in particular that you get at the very beginning are all strong inside of their own right, but at the time of me making this video, there is absolutely no way to improve them beyond making them 5 stars and feed them a total of 2,580 dragon flowers to improve all their stats by 2. This puts them at a direct disadvantage to every other unit in the game, even from launch. Also, that whole extra stats from Dragon Flowers applies to literally every infantry character released before the end of Book 2, so not only does every other character have a leg up in terms of mergeability and stats, but they also don't need as many flowers if you're only focused on one. Even if it's a new Gen 3 character as opposed to 3 of them from launch, you get nothing. This is because of the second major function of summoning. Every character you summon, with rare exception, also has randomized stats, anywhere from +3 to 4 inside of one stat, with -3 to 4 inside of another. However, those negative stats can be easily removed by merging. If you gain 2 or more of one hero, you can combine them to be one more powerful hero. You can do this up to +10 at any star rank, but the maximum for stats and abilities is 5-star +10. which is roughly a bonus of +4 to all their stats. This is what I mean by the starting heroes being at a disadvantage. They can't merge or have any boons or banes in their stats, so they're stuck with what they have. I mentioned at the start of the video that the game is rotted to the core with pay to win, and this is what I'm talking about. The only way to improve your characters is through summoning, and the only way to get these new skills and change how the game is played is through summoning. And you better start using the new heroes because the older ones just aren't able to keep up in terms of stats and abilities. The only way to improve your core team for Arena? Summoning. The only way to have permanent stat buffs and skills that help immensely inside the new game mode? Summoning on a timed exclusive event. And I'm not joking about that exclusive thing either. The skills that are just in place to band-aid a problem from another game mode, and only that game mode, are something I stand vehemently opposed to, especially whenever it's a problem that can't possibly be worked around due to underlying systems preventing you from moving up inside the rankings solely because you don't like or use a unit type. And that leads me into what is easily my most hated mode in this entire game. There is no sugarcoating this. This is the second biggest reason I haven't wanted to play Heroes or make any videos on it. Arena is easily the least fun I've had with any video game in many years. I already said earlier that I think Relay Defense is the worst game mode in terms of balance and difficulty, but it's a mode I can no longer pay attention to because it's gone from the game altogether. Not so much here. The Arena, renamed the Coliseum recently, has 3 modes: Allegiance Battles, Arena Assault, and the Standard Arena. The Standard comes first. Inside of the Arena, you will need to win 5 consecutive battles against player teams that are selected by the team with this little shield symbol next to it. When going up inside of tiers, you will get more orbs, feathers, and other miscellaneous things that you will probably want to stock up on, mentioned back inside of my boring economics talk. Sounds decent enough, and getting very good rewards sounds even better. Here comes the bullshit, however. The teams that you come across are scored on many varying factors, and come at either a high or low roll. Advance is the only way you're going to score anything relevant for higher levels, and if you get a bunch of low rolls, tough shit, you're not moving up. However, the numbers game isn't the worst part. Your score range is determined by 3 major things: the cost of SP on your skills, the BST of your unit, and most importantly, merges. Are you seeing how the original 3 are starting to be held back? Let's start with SP. The most costly skills are the ones that also give the most points. Skills like Distant Counter and Close Counter were the only skills at the time that could reach the highest bin, but now you have skills like the tier 4 skills that are worth just as much and are in multiple slots. The most costly of these skills, however, are your special skills, assist skills, and your weapon. The only specials available that aren't exclusive to a character are Ether, Gale Force, and Blue Flame. All of these specials have high cooldown and effects that are likely not ideal for the character in question, but you're forced to use these because they cost the most. The only exception to the cooldown argument is Blue Flame, but it's locked to one character that most people didn't bother wailing for anyway, so this is the next best thing. Even then, it's 3 cooldown, which isn't even ideal for speedy characters. Assist skills used to be the least expensive skills, but with the advent of dual rally skills and their advanced versions, this is now a slot that is just as important for scoring. Your weapon is either an exclusive skill that can give you a large boost of scoring, or it isn't. I'm serious, it is debatably more profitable to switch off the new exclusive weapons now if the effects aren't good in order to put on a refinable weapon just to score better, because that's how the system works. It is frustrating to say the least that you need to deliberately change your build in order to have the most valuable skills possible instead of what's best for the character in question. Regardless, let's move on to the next one, BST. Simply put, it's just how much the point total of all the unit stats are outside of skills and merges. This affects the score far more than you'd expect. Characters with optimized stat lines but low stats all around are not going to score as well as characters that have a scattershot approach to their stats. Sure, if the scattershot character has stats that are high enough, it could be a problem, but a vast majority of them aren't optimized in a way that makes them significantly more threatening than heroes that are more specialized. So, what heroes or classes have the highest BST possible? Armors and infantry. Look, I get it. Heroes with a massive stat line that can only be moved one space, easy to take on whenever they're alone. My problem is that in order to compete and get the best rewards, you need to use armored units. I don't like armored units. They only move one space, and with the exception to like 3 or 4 characters, they can't even attack at range. Unfortunately, the only method of getting into the highest tiers is to use the same 3 or 4 units and just watch both teams deal 0 times 2 to each other, unless they have effective weaponry, in which case then it's 10 times 2. Riveting. As for infantry, until recently, they've only been able to compete with the addition of armored units at your side. and they alleviate some of the armor staleness, but unless you want to get into the highest 2 tiers, which also have the best rewards, infantry units along with everyone else below them are only going to be able to assist you getting up higher, but become mute after a while until you invest into those armored units. And speaking of which, merges. Merges have the most impact on your score, and is the definitive reason as to why the starting trio can't possibly compete. On top of the fact that they don't have the BST of the newer units released today, the stars can only be brought up to 5 stars and be given some expensive seals. That's the most that can be done. This wouldn't be a problem, but the arena has a small function that makes it really difficult to use other characters. In order to get the proper amount of points needed, you need to use a bonus character on your team. The starters are used in every week to make sure the player always has someone for bonus, but otherwise it's impossible to make it to the higher tiers. That means, unless you get lucky with the bonus characters for those 2 weeks of arena, you need to use these 3 on your team when necessary. They are the equivalent of the recruits from Rainbow Six. They're there if you have literally nothing else. Given those factors of using 1 starter every week unless you get lucky, armors being the only possible way to compete inside of the higher tiers, merging being necessary to score better, this leads to the same 3 or 4 units in the highest tiers being on every team, since it's the only way to get anywhere in arena unless you spend a ton of orbs to get a plus 10 5-star or something like that, which, you know, I'm broke, so whatever. I mentioned earlier that armors were necessary for the highest tiers, but you know the one class that cannot compete due to all their stats being overall lower on the BST pins, with very few refinable exclusive weapons along with a restriction to many skills? Cavalry. Using cavalry is seen as a joke because of how low their stats are. The biggest fall from this is Reinhardt. His BST is so much lower than the melee armored units that he cannot realistically compete beyond tier 17 out of 21, or at least I've never seen him do that. You take these 2 units from launch, okay? Can enable. They recently received refinable weapons, exclusives, all that good jazz. They have the highest potential of any cavalry due to their very low rarity and ease of access. Their BST, when fully merged mind you, is lower than an armored unit released today at base. With the introduction of Generation 3 BST as it's being called, the chances of cavalry competing is even worse now. I genuinely do not understand how some people do not see this as unfair. If you're not a melee ranged armored hero, there is no chance of competing inside the highest tiers. I know there are technically skills that circumvent this system, but let me save those for after I discuss the worst aspect of arena. Inside of arena, your bonus is not only necessary to get the point boost, but you need to have them kill the enemies on the map for an additional 3 points for every enemy that you kill. This adds up for an additional 60 points every week, and is the key to getting into the highest tier since you have to do 5 matches inside of a row, all that stuff. Not only are your units inherently gimped because they need to use skills that are expensive even whenever they aren't that great, not only are they significantly restricted because of how the scoring system works, not only do you need to have at least 11 copies and at least 600,000 feathers assuming the characters aren't 5-star locked in order to score optimally, you also need to feed kills to a unit that in most cases is not going to fare all that well in the event that they are going into combat against units that are advantageous inside of color and weapon, or if they are built to deal with units like that one that you're trying to hurt them with. This is easily the worst experience I've had inside the game, period. Not only does the arena force you to use units that aren't being very well made, along with necessitating armored units, you need to baby spoon kills and hope to god that you don't accidentally kill something with your other units. This is such a dumb mechanic, why doesn't... Oh my god! Did you know that this mechanic wasn't originally inside of the game? Well, that and other changing sentiments need to be saved for later, unfortunately, so have some patience with me on that. I know I'm sort of jumping around a lot. You can't ignore this mode if you want those sick rewards. The Coliseum is the only game mode that consistently gives sacred coins and refinement stones outside of Quest. It's not a matter of don't play if you don't like it, it's play this game mode or else you're going to miss out on exclusives. FOMO, fear of missing out. It's a very dangerous and predatory practice that's going to backfire on the team one of these days. Arena Assault is the same scoring system, only completely stripped of all the bullshit involved with bonus units. The only requirement for max points is to use characters with blessings on them, this small little symbol that gives them bonus stats in the presence of a special hero. After your first round, you can go through the other 6 matches until you finish them and collect your reward at the end of the week. It's slightly better in that you're not locked to one team after your first is over, and that heroes inside the lower levels or BST can really shine here and show how strong they are. It kinda sucks that you still find the same 5 to 10 teams inside of the upper tiers, and it takes forever to complete, but otherwise, it's at least one and done, being at worst somewhat obnoxious with certain teams and maps. Now, let me discuss those skills that are used to move around the whole system. Sometime after the end of Book 2, a new skill type called Duel was released, where a unit gives up their A slot in exchange for their BST being calculated at 180, along with +5 to their HP, allowing units of certain colors and abilities to compete. Personally, I would have changed the system to grade each class individually to put them into brackets where an armored 180 BST is worth about the same as a horse at 160, along with range units being weighted upwards for the BST penalty. I'd also allow the starter to actually be merged, that way players would want to use them, you know, something that other mobile games of this genre do. I don't even like Fate Ground Order, but this is something that they actually do. Dual skills are a bandaged solution to a problem not inside of the player's control, but an algorithm. I hate these kinds of skills for how instead of fixing the problem to begin with, instead you need to both give up the most valuable skill slot in the game and pull for specific heroes who tend to have stupidly low chances in hopes of getting more than 3 or 5 units inside the top level of arena. But okay, bandaged solutions are still a solution. What kind of dual skills are out there right now? As of recording this, we only have 6, every color for dual flying along with green and colors for dual infantry. Assuming that you have the resources to burn all those orbs for the dual skills, that means that now units that are most viable for arena are now armors, flying, and 2 infantry colors. It's at least somewhat more varied now, but armors are still much easier to build overall, and the dual skills are fairly rare until they release some as a sacred skill, if they're ever going to do that. Still can't use cavalry or 2 colors of the highest tiers, however, and in case you missed it, the colors are also given to 3 of the most powerful dancers inside the entire game, so you know what that fucking means. Allegiance battles aren't something I'm too familiar with, but it's just another gauntlet of foes that you need to fight against. Only bonus is received for color matching, and you get a few more points for the more efficient you are on the map. It's just a means of getting feathers and dragonfires right now, so meh. Before I get started on the next section, I want to quickly rev back my negativity and say that I think the visuals and music for the game are very well made. The game looks and sounds like a Fire Emblem game with the cute sprites being used to help with the overall presentation. Geez, now I sound like I'm trying to make excuses. Look, I'm not harsh just because I'm here to shit on the game. Okay, I generally want to see the game get better, and whether you think trying to improve a mobile game is a lost endeavor, I still hold out that this market can produce good things and bring a whole new kind of experience to an audience of this series. Hell, other mobile games have done this, and have even made experiences that I've never seen before and actually work. I just want the same thing here. I want a well-crafted Fire Emblem experience and not just anime Pokédex version 4099, yet another thing that I'll need to say on later. I should make some notes or something. Let's finally move on to the one mode that I never so quickly lost interest in, from being something I thought would really set the game apart and be super cool to something that yet again I greatly despise playing, but still has great rewards, so tough shit. I've already talked about the gameplay earlier whenever I discussed it back inside of game modes, and I said that the core is remarkably solid, so what is it that I hate about this mode so much? Well, many things. First off, that compliment about unique maps with interesting setups and unit placement. Fuck you, Reinhardt, Lynn, Veronica, and 3 legendary Zers every goddamn match in either Spring Siege or the volcano shit, whatever it's called. This is how nearly half of the matches I come across going up into tier 21, because the setup is so strong that most characters outside of one really strong green Raven Tome unit who is strong against the enemy can even approach. Even then, there's a good chance that the sheer amount of offense becomes overwhelming. This is especially true in the highest tiers where turn 1 specials and multiple dancers are rampant. It's not even that difficult. Most of the time I just want to take in my +10 super tank to take all the damage and heal back in one hit with her blood axe and a bunch of supports. Or, you know, just spike them to death. Can't take the enemy? Just use Gale Force. Too much damage to kill them easily? Just use passive damage. The entirety of it being stale is further accentuated by how mythic heroes are being used. Mythic heroes either reduce the amount of points lost every battle that your defense team loses, or boost the amount of points gained every victory. You need to bring them on your team in order to score optimally. It's technically the same inside of Arena with legendaries, but the points required for the highest tiers are more affected by the factors mentioned earlier. Every week, just like Arena, you need to use the same 2 or 3 characters inside of every team because the amount of points needed can only be earned with them. And that's all I really got to say on that. Ether raids I mainly hate because of the map and team diversity, but otherwise I'd say earlier, I think the core gameplay is pretty solid. Now, how would I fix this? Well, first is another tower in place to do with the dancers. Maybe even do that with the next mythic hero or hero in general. Oh wait, it's timed exclusive again. Oh, fuck. Well, I would put inside a resonator or something like that, which disables dancing for the enemy team. Not sure if I make the enemy use it against the player, but given how strong a tool that is, I would take not having a dancer over having to deal with 2 or 3 on the enemy team. Or, just having one dancer for both sides. That can also happen. I would also not let the scoring be affected by mythic heroes to begin with. Yeah, I get it, the company wants to urge people to pull for these new characters inside of their new mode, but this is the wrong way to go about doing it. Don't force people to pull because the point requirements are scoring, pull because they give new options for your forts. Have it so that Air during light seasons deals -15 to death and res instead of just 7, to boost her whole Angel of Death persona. Duma already has the catapult effect, but you could also use during offense, just saying. Yoon, in addition to the whole debuffing situation, could also inflict panic as a bonus during dart seasons. I don't like the idea of making you pull for units because of just the number going up. It's not a practice I believe should be adopted. And wouldn't you know it, right after I made that initial recording, they decided not only to greatly hamper all the maps, but also made it so that you will get rewards for the less defensive losses, which basically confirms that they just wanted you to pull for the new mythics for scoring and not actually because of the units or abilities. With the recent changes, I've officially given up on any hope of the competitive modes actually being friendly towards people that don't spend or don't have the means to do so. Competitive with the new changes in my eyes has officially gone pay to win. What if you only have one mythic hero? Inside of Arena at least, the merging and skill process is mostly a time sink and not really solely based on legendaries. You have free to play options. But look at what the fuck they're doing. Exclusive skills that help inside of the new mode are locked to seasonal and other time exclusive heroes. Heroes that will be immensely helpful, whether that be for attacking or defending, are never going to appear outside of special banners, and there's even going to be some color share. I've already said earlier that Ether Raids isn't exactly hard to finish since a lot of players just take the exact same strategy and just slightly change up the layout. With the map nerfs and the lack of customizable spaces whenever it comes to the terrain and the recent defense changes, this is only going to further push everyone to use the same units because that's what's most effective. Do you think I want to just watch my super tank get pushed in with +6 to all of his or her stats and then we'll just watch as they clean house or vantage spike them with nearly 90+ attack? Fuck no, I actually want to fight the enemy, but this is the most effective strategy for getting into the highest tiers, and it's the only method that's actually able to consistently get past 2 to 3 dancers and 4 one-turn nukes. I could use Gale Force cheese, but it's really inconsistent since most of the nukes are 2 range and get killed in 1 hit themselves. It's very easy to screw up, unlike Vantage, which is very consistent since I only need to watch 1 skill as opposed to like 17 others. Can I please get a reason besides they want people to spend for the new mythics? That's not a good fucking reason. That's fishing for cash, and the arena was already horrifically stale because of the need for merges, which would require thousands of orbs for the 5-star lot heroes and potentially hundreds, and very good luck for everything below that. Then literally thousands of grails for free units. And that leads me into my final section before I discuss smaller things in the story. So here's the thing, the game right now isn't exactly pay to win whenever it comes to the story and other writing content. Hell, it's not that bad whenever it comes to what you can get as a player who can't spend a penny. If you just want to play the game for the story and occasionally get some strong characters along the way and you don't care about all this arena and ether raids bullshit, the game's not that bad. There is, however, one aspect of the game I've neglected, and that involves the whole collection aspect. It's no secret that this is a gachapon game, and as such that entails gambling. There is quite a bit of debate on this, but personally I consider gachas, loot boxes, card packs, and other randomized rewards of that nature gambling. Because of this, I have to accept that things like the drop rates, the purchase of orbs, and other investments are in their own right buying into a system that feeds on your psyche for profit. You may not be using the money by going completely free to play, but you are using something just as important to the company, and that is time. The more time spent on online games, the more the app is considered hot and trending, and that makes it more noticeable for marketplaces. I want to make it clear that this isn't an ethics or legal breakdown, and that I'm not here to champion regulation of this stuff, just what I personally see it as and what it means as a consumer of these products. But that's all the legal, real-world money stuff. How does that relate to predatory behavior? Let's briefly talk about the orb economy and how it's gone through both bountiful and very, very dry seasons. I've stated that the first year of the game was significantly more free-to-play friendly, and that largely goes back to the method of how the game was handled. Every month would have characters be in banners of 4 people with about 3 to 4 banners every month, a specialty banner every 2 months, with new heroes being released about once a month. Content was incredibly slow at this time, at least compared to what we have now. The only daily events that you needed to keep up with was Arena, occasionally doing Tempest Trials or Voting Gauntlets. However, the amount of orbs that were given were either the exact same or a little bit more than now. This includes things like like compensation orbs and other things, you used to be able to receive compensation orbs for all sorts of small things that were given mostly just for things that hardly affected anyone, but they were still inside of bundles of 5 to 20 orbs given out for nothing just to make up a bug fix. Granted, this was also when first free summons weren't a thing, but even after that period came out, the compensation was still given. I'm telling you this because as of recent, compensation hasn't been given in so many instances where it realistically should have been. Some pretty big problems, including but not limited to map layout errors, overleveled units for the difficulty, and game-breaking glitches that forced the app to close have occurred, and not only haven't had orbs given for, but have barely been addressed beyond a brief mention inside of the bulletin. The most recent compensation involved ether raids and how there was briefly a time where defense and offense teams weren't being replayed properly, and it led to a lot of people not being scored accurately during the season. The compensation was 10 orbs and 100 grails. Better, but doesn't exactly make up for earlier issues. Before someone asks me for complaining about the company not giving me free stuff, this is something that happened far more frequently over a year ago, and it's an ads they haven't been focused on as of recent. But let's go back a bit before this. There were quite a few updates since launch, and it was most certainly needed. You started out with only 50 stamina. You couldn't do shit back in the day. Stamina was a bitch to work around, units got nothing for experience, and people used to not promote units to level 40 to max out SP to purchase skills at higher rarities, and using feathers for a 5-star unit was considered impossible. Through many updates and a lot of feedback and criticism, tons of stuff was added, like the 99 stamina cap, stamina costs across the board being drastically cut down, EXP rates being raised, SP being set instead of being halved on repeated maps, and many others. New characters added came out inside of batches of either 6 or 4 and often had a few interesting abilities that were cool but nothing game changing. Overall opinions of the game were varied, but most liked how the game looked and played, and the content released, though slow, was consistent. For a while, however, barely anything in the game was changing and people started to get bored. This was also when monthly orbs were at their worst and roughly 180 per month, compensation included, until around July. The overall change in precedent and attitude didn't start overnight. It began being apparent first with the ERA incident back at the end of 2017 around October. What happened was that there was a brand new unit release on a separate banner a few days after the initial banner dropped, complete with another color sharing focus, so chances of pulling her were cut in half from 3% down to just 1.5. Not only that, this was the first instance of seeing something before which was properly known as Gen 2 BST. Her stat line was not only optimized but also had a higher BST from 157 to 163, and it's not like the focus she shared with was bad either, it's just that the character sharing with her Eldigan was much older and much less powerful by comparison. To this day, nothing else has stirred up as much ire from the community besides a very recent event, but we'll save that for whenever the time comes. It was a very dangerous precedent that felt like a sign of things to come, since online games tend to go into a period where the overall popularity and revenue goes down, which is as inevitable as power creep is. As such, this is a very dangerous area for mobile games because that usually means that the company is willing to further undermine its main audience and consumers in hopes of chasing after its top 10% of players who spend thousands of dollars on the games. Whaling, in other words. It's happened to many mobile games in the past, and it's even happened to established franchises where the mobile game damages the mainline series' reputation. Thankfully, this sort of thing never happened again, but there have still been quite a few incidents where it came very close, like how the immediate next banner involving new characters had another 2 characters share at color, but the off-banner character came on a separate banner before the others that lasted 4 days less, and could have shared focus. People were significantly more skeptical after this, and everyone got increasingly more scared of what came next for units in terms of power creep and underhanded tactics. The next holiday banner saw the release of Bold Fighter and Vengeful Fighter. One of them guaranteed a follow-up attack whenever attacking, along with a special cooldown charge with no other special condition, and Vengeful was an improved version of another skill with better effects to boot. These skills were both exclusive to a class that was considered somewhat underpowered at the time, but with the release of these 2 skills suddenly became the most threatening units in the entire game. The biggest issue at the time was that these skills were being released as seasonal skills. In other words, you absolutely needed to pull at this moment in order to get the best skills available, on top of the fact that these units had the most BST out of anyone else inside the game that came out. The end of 2017 and the beginning of 2018 was definitely where there was a growing resentment in the community as a whole, and these practices all but confirmed what many people feared. Luckily, this isn't the end of the whole story, and the 1-year anniversary came out after this. As a gift for the whole period, you received a massive boon of 50 orbs, 2 orb logins, and an additional map that gave a grand total of 50 orbs. There was also a Hero Fest, an event where you can get focus for 5% as opposed to the normal 3%, and a legendary banner at the same time, which also had an increased rates. It was also the introduction of GHB revival mats being permanent to participate and battle in, and allowed for newer players to earn these old heroes that were previously locked away and couldn't be earned again. If I'm entirely fair here, however, this isn't what most people got immensely excited about. For the future of the game, that is. Prior to this, back inside November, saw the release of Book 2, and with it many unique changes to the game, some being quality of life, and others entire mechanical additions and overhauls that were widely praised, like the weapon refinery staves becoming usable for once, and how the first legendary hero release ever was given out for free. It also introduced the best game mode to ever be released. I'm telling you this because there is still that fear about the game inside of its future, but also a ton of hype of what was to come. You could realistically see both immense joy for the game and extreme contentiousness about company practices on the exact same online forums. Many months came and went after the anniversary, and things drastically quieted down. The game entered its second major dry spell of content. New heroes and seasonal events were being released at a faster rate, but unless all those orbs being given out were saved, unlikely given how much they wanted you to pull, the characters released didn't match the income rates that we had at the time to pull everything. It was already difficult before, but now it was next to impossible to be a collector that didn't spend much because money was tight. The release of the new legendary hero, even something that was generally an assload of hype, became fairly routine and in some cases despised due to the character release already having tons of variants prior. Then July finally rolled around. There were a few things being added at this time, but the most popular subjects were the fact that Tempest trials were becoming easier to get into after some updates to the system, the introduction of 4G bonds, a game mode that had given some unique dialogue and accessories that were similar to the supports inside of the mainline Fire Emblem games, and Grand Conquests were getting some changes despite nobody really playing them, and then finally, Arena update. Prior to August for the match Arena scoring, you had to win 7 matches inside of a row with the bonus on your team rolling for the highest numbers possible. This was cut down to 5 wins instead and also gave rewards over time for your streak instead of all at once whenever the week was over and a new season started. They sound like good changes, but these additional rewards also came at the cost of weekly rewards being cut down a bit. It was an overall net positive for Arena rewards, but not as high as many people thought at first. This was also the introduction of the bonus mechanics that had been added, as discussed earlier, where you had to make kills with your bonus hero to get an additional 60 points every single week. It was a little bit controversial to say the least. This was the point where many players just outright quit the game. Nobody wanted to keep up with the arena because it was that much worse to play in, and this was on top of the system already being bad prior to these changes. With the most recent legendary hero, Lucina was a character that nobody wanted, and came with extremely broken and hard to avoid skills that made playing an arena even worse, since legendaries are some of the only units that can even appear inside of the upper tiers, with armor BST being that much higher than every other unit. The main story was barely being updated. The rewards became more and more scarce. When new events rolled around again, you never received more orbs. Instead, they are taken away in favor of menial shit like accessories and ether stones, both items that are completely worthless if you don't care. This was started back at the beginning of Book 2, but with the addition of new heroes every month started an annoying trend for people that weren't very big fans of seasonal banners. Every banner containing new units from January 12th to October 7th, with the exception of one banner, had alternative versions of characters that were previously inside of the game. While they had new artwork, weapons, and occasionally different classes, this annoyed tons of people because of the fact that one of the biggest appeals of the game was the massive variety of characters, and it felt like resources that could have been spent on original characters was instead being substituted in place of an existing character to appeal to the people that already invested inside of these older units to make more money. The most egregious of these was the Thracia banner that contained 2 new characters and 2 older ones, with a fan favorite being locked behind Tempest Trials with a shitty weapon for him. There are a grand total of 4 characters in the whole game that are unique to Thracia specifically. I'll let that sink in. And now, for a brief 1 to 2 sentence reviews of every new character banner not composed of seasonals or legendaries and given different characters for the older alternatives that weren't needed. Zelgius I was fine with, but I would prefer him being inside of his red armor so that the in-game spoiler wasn't as apparent. If I had to choose for no alternatives, I would have picked Meg because it would have been funny. Erica could have easily been Null as a Mage Knight, but even if he wasn't one inside of his original game, Erica can't even fucking use magic, why the hell does she have her spent This banner is completely fine and thematically appropriate. While having different versions of Morton is fine, I would have preferred another childhood character to take Kron's place like Cynthia, or maybe even thrown an oddball and toss in Wallheart. Reinhardt and Owen could have easily been taken by other characters from the game like Arius, Carrion, Miranda, and Felgus. Noter could have easily been Reyna, and it even makes less sense because Falcon Knight tends to be the better class for her. This banner is perfect because no alternatives in Genealogy is the best game, fight me. Nino could have easily been replaced by Urk or Penn, especially since the original character is still perfectly viable even without an exclusive weapon. This Olivia is an answer to the Azura alternate that came out near Halloween, so I'm not that bothered, but I still would have preferred an original character like Muriel or Kellum. Brave Heroes, I can't really do anything. Genealogies once again proves to be perfect. I'll be straight in that most of the time I didn't mind whenever a character got one or two different versions of themselves, as long as it made sense and wasn't too obtrusive to others. It only bothered me whenever it could easily be filled by another character, see earlier, or the character in question already had a bunch of alternates beforehand. This is a smaller thing, so I'll save it for whenever this section is over. It's still something I thought I'd mention because people's opinion on it vary quite a bit. December finally rolls around, and with it the addition of Book 3, Mythic Heroes, and Beast Units. Wait, that's it? Yep, the additions added inside of Book 3 were so marginal that compared to what we had last year, it seemed pretty underwhelming. This is what urged me to make this video. I saw that content was not going to change any more meaningfully than what we already had. It's a huge shame too, because I think a lot of what was added inside 3.0 was fine, but I can't fairly say that it's enough to bring back older players and urge them to keep playing. Ether Raids did that for a while, but as the method developed, the stale tactics finalized and it drove a lot of people away. And finally, the novelty wore off and it was time for the second year to close and prepare for the second anniversary. Many banners and heroes were available like before, only instead of being given 50 orbs like last year, you were only given 22. And daily maps only stopped at 22 orbs as well, meaning instead of being given 100 orbs for login and daily missions, you only got around 44 total, which is enough orbs to summon 2 full circles. Last year, there was an event known as A Hero Rises, where after mass voting for a specific character, everyone received one copy of that hero. Some people aren't that satisfied with the result because they want a bikini ass instead, but I think the hero given was still good inside of his own right as a multi-purpose threat that's more survivable long-term on defense. And hell, after some updates and builds that were tested, I can easily say that this is one of the deadliest fighters inside the upper tiers of Arena. This year we had Find and Vote. Instead of just voting for a character that you like to have, you know, like last year, instead they made it so that you had to search for characters that weren't on screen through this weird ass minigame where you had to drag around the screen on a mobile browser that oftentimes broke unless I happened to be using Google Chrome. And I hate Google Chrome because it's a RAM whore and it guzzles my phone's battery faster than a 4-star unit guzzles feathers. One benefit was that you had the top 4 heroes available instead of 1, and that's pretty much the only good thing I can say about it. See, unlike last year or the year prior with Brave Heroes where you got to pick the unit you wanted of a specific color and build them up from there at neutral IVs, instead you got 4 golden orbs where it's a complete mystery as to what you're going to pull. On top of that, the heroes you pull for have completely random IVs, and if you're not satisfied with the result, well, tough shit, pull on this 6% banners with no free pulls and you reduce 44 orbs that you haven't spent on the other 4 banners already, or whatever was out at the time. The 4 heroes that you got for the events were Duma, an OP as shit colorless dragon that you couldn't follow up on unless you had full HP, where he removed 7 at the start of battle. He has the highest magic damage out of any character in the game with 64 attack power at base and with an increase by 6 if you have any damage dealt to you. On top of that, pulling him gives an animal blessing, which is important for Ether Raids, but more importantly, you get this really cool double image with white which just looks super dope. And that's Legendary Azura, who I ranted about earlier, and I still wish this character was never added because dealing with her inside of Ether Raids in Arena is still cancer. The Halloween variant of Myrrh, who just like Duma is OP as shit, only this time she's red. That makes her go from completely invincible to invincible after very specific parameters are met. And finally, the legendary variant of Tiki, who is also OP as shit, only her damage isn't as high as Duma's or Myrrh's, so that makes her awful. But really, she has built-in DC and a dragon killing weapon on her side. So she's pretty bussin' for Arena and isn't as easy to cheese as the other two, which makes her better in my opinion. Except no, your 4th hero instead is Legendary Lyn, a character that in stats is a direct upgrade to one of the worst archers in the game and has a really bad stat line overall that makes clear modes of play outside of the story mode very difficult. I made a video of me using launch units against her team whenever it came out on the hero battles for orbs, and it was considered one of the harder hero battles strictly due to the fact that you had to fight a dummy thick amount of units that all had very optimized kits. With Lyn, however, she was the easiest part of the map because her stats are so bad that even with triangle advantage, she struggled to really hurt a unit with fairly subpar defenses for the time. By the way, given my reaction, guess the one I pulled with the worst possible IV spread possible. Just guess, could have been a really strong blue dragon instead, but look, gotta have that fucking color variety. Jesus, I could have gotten Tiki. Could have got my favorite character from Shadow Dragon and New Mystery. I actually like these games. What the fuck? See, with Find and Vote, it's also comparable to the other free hero banners and chapters in that the free hero received is based on color as well, and despite Tiki having more votes than Lyn by a pretty wide margin, they instead insisted on her getting the spot to fill out colors or something. Trying to get that fully merged Zura? Oh no, I got pity broken by Tiki. How awful. I guess that was the mindset, but the hero received both has IVs and is a random color, so regardless of how the preceding banner went, you're still getting randomized heroes. This is the only case where I feel it's perfectly fine to be cynical instead, because getting 3 absolute shit 5 stars versus getting 1 amazing one is immensely higher in probability. Getting 3 5 stars sounds good on paper, but all of them have a random chance of being pulled, with random IVs that are far more likely to get fucked up versus actually good or average ones, and the only one of these banners allows you to pull for more heroes aren't even at an increased rate. During the first year, as in up to the first anniversary, I spent roughly $50 total, and I can easily say I enjoyed most of what I played outside of Launch Week, and it was a pretty easy purchase too, seeing as many of the heroes had been very diversified. I liked a lot of what was being pushed out at the time. Year 2 was significantly less, roughly around $20 if I'm being generous, and that was mainly to round out a few characters missing that I desperately wanted, and to buy that $4.99 Burger King meal. The main reason? I didn't like what was being pushed out at the time, and after the arena update I just stopped spending altogether because I didn't like what was being practiced, and I've addressed it several times in feedback. Pretty sure they've tuned me out by now. I still hold to what I say in that I believe that this game can do better, and in a way better advertise a series than any regular market campaign ever could, but that's not going to happen, not with how things are ran now. Especially since you can't even buy all these games outside of these 4 on store shelves outside of used content and ambassador programs.
Isn't it actually 5?
Don't fucking talk to me about fates. And that's mostly it for that. Dry spells happening, I may not like the banners, but my biggest gripe comes from the blatant anti-consumer practice for the endgame competitive modes and other things. I didn't even mention that quests that lasted a year long weren't even renewed, or that the monthly orb deals have gotten drastically worse outside of special deals where it feels like they want you to spend loads of money. Seriously, $75 for 1 unit and a shitload of ether stones or heroic whales? No thanks, pass. Fjorma's my baby, but I ain't her fucking sugar daddy. Alright, let's just move on. And now for smaller things to either praise or complain about, and we'll start with smaller things I enjoy first because I feel I've been way too fucking negative as of late. Tempest Trials and Forging Bonds dialogue, despite being behind a stamina heavy grind wall, is still something I enjoy reading, and it makes me want to pull for the characters significantly more than previously, since even though I know what most of these characters are and their supports in their games, you can still see a unique side to not only the new characters but also to the main cast when they're present. The only exception is if they're played as a one trick, but that rarely happens. Animations for characters generally have gotten way better since launch. Older sprites and animations all tend to look the same, but a lot of 5-star exclusive characters and even some GHBs have really unique animations and sprite work that is a marvel to look at, and it's definitely getting better over time. I like how despite the alternatives most likely making them more money with whales, they usually opt for more original characters now on newer banners and for characters widely requested for since launch or since a new unit type was added. I also really like that most of the recent alternates, with only a few exceptions, tend to be of characters that aren't as popular or as well liked as main characters or from the best selling games. Hero battles, despite being short and only lasting a couple days at most, are still a fun challenge that offer a unique experience not had in most other modes of play, and despite the bullshit that is Abyssal, I still think most of the battles are pretty great. Paralogs 18, 27, and 31. I'm not going to talk about the paralogs later, so I'm mentioning these here. Even if I may not like some of the banner choices, the writing on all 3 of these are very well done and is definitely appropriate to the characters in question. For 18 and 31, they both deal with loss and how despite these father figures wanting the best for their children, they can't be there because of events occurring in their respective games. So instead they try to live with what they have and make the best of inside of their very short time together. Very touching stuff. For 27, you have an entire dream sequence where a child version of Azura is trapped inside of her dreams and refuses to wake up, with Loki coercing her into staying asleep forever, talking about infinite possibilities, timelines, granting wishes, and other multiverse stuff until your team shatters the illusion. When Azura as an adult saves her younger self from these self-inflicted nightmares, baby Azura actually lashes out because she was actually happy for once compared to her reality, where she grew up with abusive parents and being widely hated from her adopted family. I know that because of Fates. Older Azura tells her that no matter how much she dreams, eventually all dreams end and that you need to wake up. I enjoy that power creep has been fairly tame compared to many other gachas and mobile games. Sure, it's still there and kind of annoying whenever it happens, but most of the time even launch units can be adequate in most modes of play, even if their stats aren't the best. You can put most of these non-exclusive skills on any character bearing a few very odd exceptions, like Flashing Blade or Sturdy Impact. Seriously, what's so powerful about Flashing Blade that stays exclusive to armors and infantry? There's tons of better A slots, and especially since skills that exist for armors completely outclass it. And would you look at that, there I go complaining again. Well, so I guess it's time for small things I disliked but weren't big enough for their own section. Tier 4 skills are a really dumb concept because it's a direct form of power creep that damages a lot of the game's previous model for powerful skills. It's at least nice that they cost more SP than normal because that means I can use something besides distant counter on all my units, but I prefer original abilities that I could inherit instead. Plus, they have this really ugly ass yellow border that looks very awful and just bleh. I'll briefly address that I don't mind most alts, but getting a 4th or 5th version of a character is really off-putting and kind of feels like they're just running out of ideas. I consider the male and female versions of Avatar characters to be separate, so them getting a lot doesn't bother me too much, but we're at 7 Camillas, can we please tone it down a bit? Speaking of which, I hate how a lot of fan service is handled in this game. It's literally a bunch of tits and ass most of the time and hardly any of it has any taste. They've also made some characters more and more provocative over time and it looks really tacky. If I want tits and ass, I'll look at a porn or hentai site. Be more thoughtful about how you make your characters. I don't hate Camilla because I'm a virgin beta cuck or some other insult that 4chan likes to throw at people who don't like this stuff. It's because I hate characters that go
Look at my fucking ass and tits windows on my clothes. I'm so fucking sexy that the sheer side of me makes men just fucking shit and cum in their pants at the same time. Or the women need to step up their games. Back to me, Spirit Lord!
4 and 5 star demotes I like quite a bit, but they haven't demoted a single 5 star exclusive from the summoning pool once, and it's a bit absurd trying to justify this decision. There are a bunch of 5 stars that really should not be in the pool anymore, and splitting the pool into separate categories depending on where you pull is not the right answer, especially since the best way to save orbs is to hold off until new unit banners are made. It makes collecting every hero even worse than previously, since there's a ton of heroes that both never get demoted and never show up on a banner again after its debut. It's pretty annoying, and this is the only problem if you're a collector, but I thought I should mention it. Stamina's still a thing and I hate it. Also, fuck Horn. I don't know, I kinda hate Fates and it being more than 1/4 of the game's entire cast makes me want to vomit, but that's mostly a personal thing with like this entire section. Regardless, I think they should just not release any more banners with Fates characters unless they're entirely unique. I don't want my 5th alt of Ryoma, Xander, Elise, or whoever, I just want more original characters, okay? And that's pretty much it for smaller things. Short section, but again, this is mostly personal opinion stuff and I didn't want to discuss it too much because it's not important to the game as a whole. Sure, I can point out some little neat things I like, but it's still a game that I overall find to be a very poorly made product. Since I know that there's those of you out there that don't give a shit about the story, I'll give my final verdicts now. Overall, Fire Emblem Heroes is only fun for me if I'm willing to ignore more than half of the stuff involved with things like the competitive modes and not caring about collecting stuff. But those two things are really important, especially to mobile games, and this game in particular considering its genre. As a mobile game, there's tons of other options out there. I only play Heroes because of the Fire Emblem aspect, but there's not much of the main series to keep me interested here. Looks and sounds can only carry a game so far, and at this point I'm at my wit's end. I don't enjoy this game, and the only reason I keep playing is to keep tabs on the story that's taking forever to finish. Even if I was to take a break and not play the game for a month or two to avoid burnout, my core problems aren't magically going to be fixed because they directly relate to gameplay. Someone that is kind of notorious for being a troll for the game said inside of a tweet several months ago, "How do you feel about your money being spent on a 5th Camille alt?" He was obviously trying to piss people off, but it got me thinking, if the game's not fun, why should I keep playing? As a final note here, I'll say that playing any free-to-play game or any launch-standing online game that consistently gets updates and not liking it and then quitting right afterwards is not the worst thing that can happen to the consumer. Imagine the game started out inside of a state that you liked, enjoyed, and even loved at times for any number of reasons, or that you enjoyed it after a few changes that overall made quality of life improve. Imagine for a minute that you spent money on the in-game monetization because you authentically enjoyed your time playing it. Now imagine that the company behind it started doing a bunch of shit that you didn't like to the modes of play that you previously enjoyed. Imagine that after sticking with the game for years and as a long-term player, that the rewards and treatment of other players gets worse and worse. Imagine that after so much time of not listening and not paying attention to your player base, the same one leaving inside of droves, mind you, that you continue to double down and not change a single thing either from the game or your business model, and that the money you previously spent is effectively wasted because a company took that service you enjoyed and ruined it. That, for me at least, is Fire Emblem Heroes. And that officially is the end of part 1. I realized that if I didn't split this into 2 parts, that the entire analysis of the game would take up nearly 3 full hours as opposed to just 1.5. So for convenience, but also for the fact that I wanted to make the August deadline, I cut the video in half. Considering that I've got most of part 2 recorded, I won't need to worry about editing as much, but it's still going to take some time since it encapsulates all of the story from books 1 to 3. It's also going to be an hour long, and spending that much time ripping into a mobile game story seems like wasted effort, but hey, I've already came this far, might as well keep going. I hope it was at least somewhat enjoyable watching me complain about a game I initially enjoy become an absolute mess that I never want to associate or play with ever again as long as I don't need to. Videos I made on the game will still be up and available in the playlist linked below, but they are very different from this one to say the least. Anyways, that's all for now, and can I just say I picked a good time to come back now of all times. That's some spicy drama coming up inside of my news feed.